A single copper piece. That was the price of a life in the gray market. Rain slicked the cobblestones of the slave pits, mixing with filth and the metallic scent of desperation. But Elena Harper didn't care about the smell. She cared about survival. She didn't want a lover, and she certainly didn't want a king. She just needed something big enough to scare the debt collectors away from her door. When the auctioneer kicked the motionless man with the burlap sack over his head, the crowd laughed. He was the reject, the broken thing. Elena stepped forward, her hand trembling as she offered her last coin. She thought she was buying a bodyguard. She had no idea she'd just purchased the most dangerous predator on the continent, and that he would burn the world down to keep her safe. The rain in Sector 7 didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Elena Harper pulled the collar of her threadbare coat tighter, trying to ignore the biting wind whipping through the auction yard. It was a miserable Wednesday in the gray market, a lawless strip of territory nestled between human settlements and the shifting borders of the werewolf clans. Here, money was God, and morality was a ghost story. Elena had exactly 1 copper coin left in her pocket, a saint's tier, the lowest denomination of currency in the realm. Usually enough for a loaf of stale bread. Today she hoped it was enough to buy a life. "Next up," the auctioneer bellowed. His name was Gideon Rock, a man whose skin looked like oiled leather and who smelled perpetually of cheap cigars. He cracked a whip against the wooden platform. "Lot 47, a stray. Found him wandering near the border of the Obsidian Peaks. Doesn't talk, doesn't fight, barely eats." 2 bruisers dragged a man onto the stage. He was heavy. Elena could see the wood planks sag under his weight, but he didn't help them. He was dead weight, wrists bound with silver-infused iron chains that hissed when they touched his skin. He wore nothing but tattered trousers caked in mud. His torso was a map of violence, scars crisscrossing his chest, some old and silver, others fresh and angry red. But the defining feature was the burlap sack tied roughly over his head. "What's wrong with his face?" a voice shouted from the crowd. Gideon spat on the floor. "Ugly as sin, probably. Or maybe he's got the rot. Who cares? He's big. He can lift heavy rocks until he drops. Bidding starts at 5 silver pieces." The crowd went silent. 5 silver was too much for damaged goods. The man swayed on his knees, head bowing low, rain soaking the burlap sack. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't need a worker. She needed a scarecrow. Her father, a gambler with a heart of gold and a brain of mush, had died 3 weeks ago, leaving behind a massive debt to the local crime lord, a man named Vincent the Blade Russo. Vincent had given Elena 1 month to pay up, or he'd take payment in trade. That deadline was 3 days away. Elena was 5'3" and possessed the fighting skills of a wet napkin. She needed someone big to stand in her doorway and look menacing when Vincent's collectors came. Just a deterrent. "No takers?" Gideon sneered. "Come on, look at the shoulders on him." Silence stretched. Rain fell harder. "Fine," Gideon growled. "I'm not feeding him another night. I'll slit his throat right here and save the cage space." He pulled a serrated knife from his belt. The man in the sack didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just knelt there, accepting the end. That resignation broke something inside Elena. It was the same look her father had on his face the night his heart gave out. "Wait!" Elena's voice cracked. She pushed through laughing mercenaries and stepped to the edge of the platform, mud coating her boots. Gideon looked down at her, amusement dancing in his cruel eyes. "Well, look at this. Little Ellie here to serve drinks. I want to buy him," she said, voice trembling but chin high. "With what?" Gideon laughed. "Your father's debt?" Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out the saint's tear. She slammed the copper coin onto the wet wood. 1 copper. You said you were going to kill him. That's 0 profit. This is 1 profit. The crowd chuckled. It was an insult, a joke. Gideon stared at the coin, then at the knife, and finally at the hulking prisoner. He shrugged. Sold to the girl with the death wish. Get him out of my sight before I change my mind. Gideon kicked the prisoner in the ribs. Get up, dog. You belong to the waitress now. The man didn't move. Elena scrambled onto the stage, ignoring jeers from the crowd. She grabbed the man's arm. His skin was burning hot, radiating fever heat that shocked her fingertips. Please, she whispered, leaning close. You have to get up. If you don't walk, I can't carry you. And if we stay here, we both die. For a second, nothing happened. Then a low rumble vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, but a groan of immense effort. Muscles bunched under scars. Slowly, painfully, the man rose. He towered over her, even slumped with exhaustion. Well over 6 feet tall. He swayed, threatening to crush her, but he found his balance. Come on, Elena said softly. Step down. 1 foot, then the other. She led him through the crowd like a child leading a blinded bear. She gripped the copper chain connecting his wrists and pulled him into the labyrinth of alleyways leading to the slums. She'd paid 1 coin for a man she couldn't see. She told herself she'd just saved a life. She didn't know she'd just changed history. Elena's apartment was a converted storage closet above a failing bakery. It smelled of yeast and damp wood, but it had a lock on the door, the only luxury Elena could afford. Getting the man up the narrow stairs had been a nightmare. He'd stumbled twice, nearly taking out the banister, his breathing ragged and wet. Now, he sat on her only rug, back against the wall, legs sprawled out. Elena locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. She let out a breath she'd been holding for an hour. Okay, she said, turning to him. Rule number 1. You don't hurt me. I don't hurt you. I feed you. You look scary when bad men knock on the door. Deal? The man said nothing. His chest heaved. Elena approached cautiously. I need to take that thing off your head. I need to see if you're human or wolf. She reached out. He didn't recoil. Her fingers found the knot of the burlap sack at the back of his neck. It was wet and tight, but she worked it loose. With a gentle tug, she pulled the sack away. Elena gasped, dropping the fabric. He wasn't ugly. He was terrifyingly beautiful. His hair was matted with blood and mud, dark as a raven's wing, falling into his eyes. His jaw was strong, covered in a week's worth of dark stubble. A jagged cut ran from his temple to his cheekbone, but it didn't mar his face. It gave him a dangerous edge. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. They were amber, not soft brown, but glowing molten gold. The eyes of a wolf. And right now they were dilated, unfocused, burning with pain. Wolf, she whispered. He blinked, trying to focus on her face. His lips cracked as he tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. Water? Elena scrambled to her small kitchenette, filling a chipped mug. She rushed back and held it to his lips. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. Slow down, she chided gently. You'll get sick. He finished and let his head fall back against the wall. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. His nostrils flared, inhaling her scent. Who? He rasped, voice like gravel. I'm Elena, she said. I bought you. Well, I paid the exit fee. I don't believe in owning people. He let out a dry, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Everyone owns someone. Not here, she said firmly. She reached for the first aid kit, a bottle of cheap whiskey and clean rags. That cut on your face is infected. And your wrists. She looked at the silver cuffs. The skin underneath was raw, burned black by the metal. Silver was poison to wolves. It blocked their healing, kept them weak. If left too long, it would drive them mad. I don't have the key, she said, panic rising. Gideon didn't give me the key. The man closed his eyes. Wolf's bane, he muttered. In the blood. Elena understood. They'd been dosing him, keeping him sedated so he couldn't shift. The silver was just back up. "I can clean the wounds," she said, pouring whiskey onto a rag. "But the silver has to come off. I have a hacksaw. It's for pipes. It'll take hours." "Do it," he growled through gritted teeth. Elena spent the next 4 hours on her knees in front of the stranger. Her hands blistered as she sawed at the iron links. The silver inlay made the metal soft but dense. Every time the saw slipped and grazed his skin, his body seized, muscles locking like steel cables. But he never cried out. She learned the geography of his pain, the way he held his breath when she touched his ribs, the way his eyes tracked the door every time a floorboard creaked outside. As she worked, she talked. She didn't know why, but the silence felt heavy. She told him about her father, about Vincent, about the copper coin. "You're a fool," the man said quietly, voice gaining strength as the night wore on. "Excuse me?" Elena paused, the saw resting on the chain. "You spent your last coin on a dead man. You should have bought a knife." "I'm not a killer," Elena said softly. "Then you'll be a victim," he replied, amber eyes boring into hers. "What's your name again?" "Elena. Ellie." "Ellie," he tested the name. It sounded foreign on his tongue, used to shouting commands, not whispering names in the dark. "I'm Kieran." He didn't give a last name. He didn't say, "I am Alpha Kieran Blackwood, sovereign of the Obsidian Peaks, ruler of the 7 Packs." He couldn't. That man died the day his second-in-command, Malcolm Vane, slipped Wolf's bane into his wine and sold him to slavers while his pack watched, paralyzed by lies. If he told her who he was, she would run. Or worse, she'd try to sell him back to his enemies for a fortune. "Just Kieran?" she asked. "Just Kieran." With a final screeching snap, the chain between his wrists broke. The cuffs were still on, but his hands were free to move independently. Kieran let out a deep, shuddering breath. He looked at his hands, flexing stiff fingers. He could feel the wolf inside him, buried under layers of drug-induced fog, stirring. It was weak, a flickering candle in a storm, but it was there. He looked at the small, fragile human woman sitting in front of him. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were stained with grease and his blood. She smelled like rainwater and cheap soap. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed in her living room. "Thank you," he said. It was the first time in 6 months he'd said those words. "Don't thank me yet," Elena said, standing and stretching her back. "Vincent comes on Friday. You need to be able to stand without falling over by then." Kieran looked at her, then up to her face. A strange protective instinct flared in his chest. Not the alpha's duty to his pack, but something primal. She'd fed him. She'd freed his hands. "Friday," Kieran repeated. "Who is Vincent?" "A loan shark. A human." Kieran's lip curled. A human threatening his savior. The wolf inside growled, a sound that was audible this time. Elena took a step back, eyes wide. "Don't worry, little copper," Kieran said, using the nickname that popped into his head. He slowly stood. He was still dizzy, but freedom of his hands gave him balance. He towered over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. "By Friday," he vowed, voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated the floorboards. "Vincent will wish he'd never learned your name." But Kieran had a bigger problem than a loan shark. As the wolf's bane began to metabolize out of his system, the scent hit him. It had been masked by mud and blood and drugs. But now, in close quarters, it was undeniable. The scent of ozone and wildflowers. Mate? The realization hit him like a physical blow. The moon goddess, in her infinite, twisted sense of humor, had paired the Alpha King with a destitute human waitress in the slums. He couldn't claim her. Not now. He was a king without a throne, a wolf without a pack. If his enemies knew she was his mate, they wouldn't just kill her. They'd use her to break him completely. He had to lie. He had to pretend she was nothing more than a means to an end. "I need food," Kieran demanded, his tone hardening to mask his revelation. "Meat. Rare." Elena blinked at the sudden shift in his demeanor. I have some leftover ham." "Bring it." As she turned to the fridge, Kieran leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He would protect her from Vincent. He owed her that. But once he had his strength back, he would leave. He had a kingdom to reclaim and a traitor to kill. There was no room for a human mate in his war. Or so he told himself. 3 days passed in a blur of fever and tension. Kieran healed with terrifying speed. Smaller cuts vanished overnight. The deep gash on his face sealed into a silver scar that only added to his menacing allure. He spent days doing push-ups on her floor, hundreds of them, sweat slicking his skin as he burned the last poison from his blood. Elena worked double shifts at the bar, bringing home scraps of steak and raw hamburger she pretended the cook had thrown out. She watched him warily. He was intense, silent, and occupied too much space in her tiny world. But he was also oddly domestic. One evening she came home to find the leaky faucet fixed. The next, the window that always jammed was sliding perfectly. He didn't say a word about it, and neither did she. But the tension shifted from fear to strange, comfortable cohabitation. Then came Friday. Elena had tried to send Kieran away. "You don't have to do this. You can slip out the back. Vincent is dangerous." "You paid a coin," Kieran had replied, sharpening a steak knife. "I honor the contract." Now the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the apartment floor. A heavy knock rattled the door. "Open up, Ellie. Daddy's debt is due." It was Marco, Vincent's lead enforcer, a man who enjoyed his job too much. Elena's hands shook. She looked at Kieran. He was sitting in the lone armchair, hidden in shadows. He'd pulled the hood of a large sweatshirt over his head. "Open it," Kieran said softly. Elena unlocked the door. Marco pushed his way in, followed by 2 other thugs carrying baseball bats. Marco grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "There she is. You got the money ready, right?" I don't have it all," Elena stammered. "I have 200. I need more time." Marco clicked his tongue. "Time's up, sweetheart. Vincent said if you're short, we take collateral. Nice place. We can sell the furniture. Maybe we sell you to the brothel in Sector 5. You'd fetch a good price." One of the thugs reached out to grab Elena's arm. Growl. It was a low, subsonic sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The thugs froze. "You got a dog, Ellie?" Marco laughed nervously. "Let her go." A voice spoke from the corner, calm, dark, dripping with authority. Kieran stood. He kept the hood up, but his size was undeniable. He stepped into the light. "Who's the boyfriend?" Marco sneered, trying to regain bravado. "Listen, pal, this is business. Walk away and keep your kneecaps." "You touched her," Kieran said. He took a step forward. "Get him," Marco yelled. The thug with the bat swung, a vicious blow aimed at Kieran's head. Kieran didn't dodge. He caught the bat mid-swing with one hand. The wood cracked under his grip. With a casual flick, he wrenched the bat away and backhanded the thug across the face. The man flew across the room, crashing into the kitchenette with a sickening thud. The second thug pulled a knife. Kieran moved faster than human eyes could track. He closed the distance, grabbed the man's throat, and lifted him off the ground with one arm. The thug kicked helplessly, feet dangling. "Leave," Kieran whispered to the choking man. He tossed him onto the landing outside like a bag of trash. Marco was alone, trembling, reaching for a pistol in his waistband. "Don't," Kieran warned. His hood fell back. Marco saw the eyes, glowing amber. "Wolf," Marco gasped. You're a stray. You're nothing." Kieran stepped closer, looming over the enforcer. He leaned down, face inches from Marco's. "I am not a stray. And if you ever come near this door again, if you ever look at her again, I will find you. I will make you regret every breath you've ever taken. Do You understand? Marco nodded frantically, urine darkening the front of his trousers. Run! Marco ran. He scrambled over his fallen comrade and threw himself down the stairs. Silence returned. Elena was pressed against the wall, eyes wide. She'd seen violence in the gray market, but never like this. This was controlled, efficient, regal violence. Kieran turned to her. The golden glow faded from his eyes, returning to deep, warm honey. Are you hurt? He asked. Elena shook her head slowly. Who are you, Kieran? Really? Kieran looked at the open door, then at the woman who'd saved him. The woman who was his mate. He couldn't lie anymore, not after showing his strength. I'm someone who's been gone too long, he said heavily, and I have to go back. He walked to the window, looking toward the distant silhouette of mountains, the obsidian peaks. My name is Kieran Blackwood, he said, turning to face her. And someone has stolen my throne, Elena gasped. Every child. He knew the name Blackwood. The Alpha King. The strongest wolf of his generation. The king? She whispered. I bought the king for a penny. And that penny, Kieran said, walking to her and gently taking her hand, the first time he'd initiated touch, bought you my protection. Forever. I have to go to the peaks, Ellie. I have to stop Malcolm Vane. You'll die alone, she said. You have no pack. No money. I have my claws. You need a way in, Elena countered, her mind racing. The borders are closed, but I know the smugglers. I know the routes. No, Kieran growled. It's too dangerous. You belong to me, remember? Elena said, sudden fierce courage taking hold. I have the receipt. You don't go anywhere without me. Kieran stared at her. He should order her to stay. He should use his alpha voice to command obedience. But looking at the fire in her eyes, he knew it was useless. She was his mate. She was as stubborn as he was. Pack your bag, little copper, the Alpha King said, a hint of a dangerous smile playing on his lips. We leave at dawn. The journey to the obsidian peaks was treacherous. They crossed the Iron River on a rusted cable pulley, Elena nearly falling into the churning gray water before Kieran hauled her to safety with inhuman strength. They hiked through frozen forests, slept in caves, ate cold rations. Elena learned that beneath the king's cold exterior was a man who'd been betrayed by the person he trusted most. Malcolm was my brother, Kieran told her one night, staring into the darkness. Not by blood, but by bond. We fought side by side in the territorial wars. I trusted him with my life. How did he catch you? Elena asked. He didn't catch me. He toasted me. Kieran's voice was bitter. It was my birthday. He poured the wine. It was laced with wolf's bane and paralytic. I couldn't move. I watched as he killed my personal guard. Then he put the sack over my head and sold me to the lowest bidder. He turned to Elena. That's why I can't lose. If he stays on the throne, the pack will suffer. He rules by fear. I ruled by law. You'll win, Elena said simply. How can you be so sure? Because he underestimated you, she said, and because you have me. Kieran looked at her, small, fragile, determined. And what can a waitress do against an army of wolves? Elena smiled, cunning glint in her eye. Waitresses are invisible, Kieran. We hear everything. We see the things people think we're too stupid to notice. Malcolm expects a warrior at his gates. He won't be looking for the girl pouring his wine. Kieran felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She was right, and that terrified him, because to use her as a weapon, he'd have to put her right in the lion's mouth. They reached Black Hollow, a mining town at the base of the Obsidian Peaks. They met with Victor Hale, the quartermaster who supposedly held keys to secret tunnels beneath the palace. But Elena noticed something Kieran missed, the way Victor sweated despite the cold room, the tremor in his hands, the new gold ring on his finger. We're not going to his farm, Elena said suddenly. What? Kieran frowned. Look at his boots, Elena pointed. Red clay. That's from the canyon where the garrison is stationed, not from his farm. He's been to the soldiers. Victor's face went pale. He lunged for an alarm cord. Traitor! Kieran roared, but it was too late. The tavern exploded with soldiers, the elite guard in black armor. Kieran fought like a demon, but there were too many. Malcolm Vane himself appeared, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed. Hello, brother, Malcolm smiled. You look terrible. Kill the girl, Malcolm ordered. Bring him to the dungeon. No, Kieran roared. A warlock's purple lightning struck Kieran in the chest. The Alpha King fell, paralyzed. Kieran, Elena screamed. She slashed at the nearest guard with her knife, but a heavy gauntlet backhanded her. She hit the ground, dazed. She saw them dragging Kieran away, his eyes locked on hers, mouthing, "Run!" But she couldn't run. Put her in the wagon, Malcolm ordered dismissively. She can work in the kitchens until the execution. I want Kieran to know she's close, but out of reach. It will break him faster. Elena's vision faded to black. The royal kitchens were hell, steam, noise, and shouting. Elena was assigned to pot scrubbing, the lowest job in the castle. Her hands were raw, her back ached, and her heart was bleeding. It had been 2 days since the capture. Rumors flew. The false king is in the iron hold. The execution is tomorrow night. Elena scrubbed a cauldron until her reflection stared back. She wasn't crying. She was planning. Hey, new girl, the head cook shouted. Haul these wine casks to the upper banquet hall. His Majesty is hosting dinner for the High Council tonight. Elena nodded, keeping her head down. Yes, chef. This was her chance. She loaded a cart with barrels, but she didn't go to the banquet hall. Instead, she went to a narrow alcove near the wine cellar. She'd stolen handfuls of nightshade and wolf's bane from the herb delivery, crushed them into paste, and hidden them in the barrels. But chaos wasn't enough. She needed a key to the iron hold. A guard rounded the corner. You there! What are you doing? Elena dropped a ladle, making a clatter. Oh, sir, I'm so sorry. I was just checking the seal. Chef will kill me if the wine is corked. The guard rolled his eyes. Stupid human. Get moving. Yes, sir. But could you help me? She battered her eyelashes. The wheel is stuck. The guard sighed, his pride baited. Move aside. He bent down to check the wheel. Elena grabbed the heavy wine bottle she'd hidden behind her back. Thwack. She brought it down on the base of his skull with every ounce of strength. The guard crumbled. Elena dragged him into the alcove, hands shaking violently. She searched. His belt. There, a heavy ring of iron keys. She took his dagger. Sorry, she whispered, but I have work to finish. She didn't go to the banquet hall. She went down, past the kitchens, past the cellars, into the cold dark of the dungeons. The iron hold was designed to hold monsters. The walls were lined with silver. The air hummed with suppression wards. There were 2 guards at the main gate. Elena couldn't fight them, but she had the waiter's greatest weapon, the assumption of servitude. She grabbed a tray of kitchen scraps. She walked right up to them. Delivery for the prisoner. King Malcolm says he wants the prisoner to eat well before tomorrow. Wants him strong for the show. The guards exchanged a look. You smell like fear, girl. I'm afraid, she stuttered truthfully. He's a monster, isn't he? The guards laughed. He was. Now he's just meat. Go on. They opened the gate. Elena walked into the corridor of cells. At the very end, in a cell made of glass and silver bars, sat Kieran. He was chained to the wall by neck and wrists. Shirtless, body covered in new wounds, head hung low. Elena approached the glass. Kieran, she whispered. His head snapped up. His eyes were dull, the gold fading to brown. He blinked, thinking he was hallucinating. Ellie? I told you, she said, tears finally spilling as she jammed the key into the lock. I paid a coin. I'm not leaving without my purchase. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Kieran stared as she rushed in, fumbling with the keys to the chains. How? He rasped. I hit a guard with a bottle of Merlot, she said frantically. It was a 2015 vintage, a waste of good wine. The heavy chains fell. Kieran caught her before she could pull away. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. He was trembling. You're insane, he breathed against her skin. You're the most reckless, foolish, magnificent creature I've ever met. Can we flirt later? Elena asked. Voice muffled by his chest. We have to go. No, Kieran said, pulling back. His eyes were igniting again, gold returning, brighter than before. The proximity of his mate, her courage. It was feeding his wolf, breaking the suppression wards through sheer force of will. We're not leaving, Kieran said. A dark, terrifying smile spread across his face. The High Council is upstairs. Malcolm is upstairs. He stood, stretching his arms, joints popping. Power radiating off him made the air distort. Tonight, the Alpha King declared, we don't run. Tonight, we dine. The banquet hall was opulent, chandeliers dripping with crystals, tables groaning under roasted beasts and exotic fruits. Malcolm sat at the head, raising a goblet. To the future, and to the end of the Blackwood line. The council members raised their glasses. Boom! The massive double doors didn't just open. They disintegrated. Wood splinters flew like shrapnel. Through the dust, a figure walked in. He wore tattered trousers and was covered in dungeon filth, but he wore it like a royal mantle. His eyes burned like twin suns. Beside him walked a small human woman in a dirty maid's dress, holding a guard's dagger. Kieran, Malcolm whispered, his glass slipping and shattering. You're sitting in my chair, Kieran said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner. Guards! Malcolm screamed. Kill him! 12 elite guards rushed Kieran. This time there was no ambush, no drugs, only the Alpha King in the presence of his mate. Kieran moved like a storm. He didn't shift fully. He entered the war form. Humanoid, but with claws, fangs, and fur rippling across his skin. He tore through the guards. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Elena stayed back against a stone pillar. A guard tried to flank Kieran, aiming for his exposed back. Elena saw it. She threw the dagger. It wasn't a kill shot, but it buried in the guard's thigh. He stumbled. Kieran spun, saw the guard, and finished him. He looked at Elena and winked. Malcolm stood, face twisting into pure rage. I should have killed you in the womb. Malcolm shifted, a massive golden wolf, larger than the others but sleek, pampered. Kieran shifted too. His wolf was midnight black, scarred, radiating ancient dark power. The two kings collided in the center of the room, overturning the banquet table. They tore at each other, a whirlwind of fur and teeth. Malcolm was fast, but he'd grown soft in the palace. Kieran had spent weeks in hell. He'd been broken and rebuilt. Kieran caught Malcolm's throat in his jaws. He bit down. Malcolm whimpered, a high, pathetic sound. Kieran threw him across the room. Malcolm shifted back to human form, sliding across marble, bleeding heavily. Kieran stood over him, shifting back, naked, covered in blood, terrifying and majestic. Do it, Malcolm spat. Kill me. Make me a martyr. Kieran raised his hand, claws extended. Wait. The voice was soft. Elena stepped forward. The room went silent. He doesn't get to die yet, Elena said. She looked at the council members. He owes money. Kieran frowned, confused. What? He sold my king for 5 silver pieces to a slaver, Elena said. She turned to the trembling council. That's a crime under pack law, isn't it? Trafficking an alpha. One of the older council members nodded slowly. It's treason, punishable by the collar. Kieran smiled, cruel and cold. The collar, iron infused with silver, blocks the wolf, keeps you human, forever. Malcolm's eyes went wide with true horror. No. Kill me. No, Kieran said. You wanted power. You wanted to rule humans. Then you can live as one in the mines of Black Hollow. Kieran turned to the room. I am Kieran Blackwood. Does anyone dispute my claim? The council members fell to their knees as one. Long live the king. Kieran didn't look at them. He turned to Elena. He walked to her, ignoring the blood, ignoring the crowd. He cupped her face in his large, rough hands. You saved me, he said. I made an investment, she smiled, though tears streamed down her soot-stained face. Then I suppose I have to pay you back, Kieran murmured. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a claiming, a promise. And in front of the entire werewolf nobility, the Alpha King marked the human waitress as his queen. From the slave pits of the Grey Market to the throne of the Obsidian Peaks, Elena and Kieran proved that power isn't about claws or crowns. It's about loyalty. It's about love. Kieran got his kingdom back, but he found something far more valuable, a partner who loved the man, not the monster. And as for Malcolm, well, let's just say the mines of Black Hollow are not kind to soft hands.